My name is Jane Withrow, and I am 31 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been the reliable one in my family. The person everyone calls when something needs fixing, covering, smoothing over, or quietly sacrificing. It wasn't a role I ever formally agreed to, but it settled onto my shoulders so naturally that I didn't even notice when it became permanent. While my sister Amy and my sister-in-law Sarah followed what my parents loved to call the normal path marriage right out of college kids before 30 houses in neat suburban rows, I went in a different direction. I chose my career. I chose long nights, skipped holidays, and a version of myself that learned how to survive on coffee deadlines and stubborn determination. I started at my company as an entry-level analyst with a cubicle barely big enough to stretch my legs, and now I sit in a corner office on the 23rd floor managing projects worth more money than my parents ever made in a year combined. Sometimes late at night, when the city glows beneath my window and the office is quiet enough to hear the hum of the building itself, I let myself feel proud. I earned this. Every promotion came with a cost, and I paid it willingly. My family, however, has never quite known what to do with that version of me. At every gathering, my career becomes a side note, something mentioned politely before the real interrogation begins. When are you going to settle down? Don't you get lonely? You know you're not getting any younger. Sarah, in particular, loves to lean in with a smile that looks kind but feels sharp and say, "I know this nice guy from church. He'd be perfect for you." The implication is always the same. My life is missing something essential, and no amount of professional success will ever make up for it. What frustrates me most isn't even the comments themselves, it's the way they talk about my job like it's a hobby, something I do in my spare time between helping them with their real responsibilities. I'm a senior project manager handling multi-million-dollar accounts, but to them, I'm just Jane, the single one, the flexible one, the one who can always help. And I do help. I always have. I love my nieces and nephews more than I can explain, and I've shown up for them in every way that mattered. Birthday parties with over-the-top gifts, school plays where I sat in the front row recording everything sick days, when their parents had important meetings and I burned through my own PTO to play nurse. I became the cool aunt by accident, the one who never said no. Over time, that willingness turned into expectation. Amy calls me at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday because daycare closed early. Sarah texts me last minute asking if I can just swing by and watch the kids for a few hours. Weekends, evenings, holidays, it's all fair game. Because as Amy once said without a hint of irony, it's not like you have anything better to do. For a long time, I told myself I was okay with it. I convinced myself that being needed was enough, that being reliable was its own kind of love. Looking back now, I can see how carefully I avoided asking myself whether anyone ever returned that care. My coworker Lisa, who somehow manages to be both brutally honest and deeply kind, noticed it before I did. She'd see my phone light up again and again during meetings and shake her head. One afternoon, after watching me silence yet another emergency call from Amy, she asked me very calmly, "Jane, when was the last time someone in your family asked how you were doing?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. That should have been my first warning sign. Things started feeling off in more obvious ways not long after. Sarah once asked me to watch her kids because she claimed she had a critical doctor's appointment. I rearranged my entire workday to make it happen, only to discover later, thanks to her own Instagram stories, that she'd actually spent the afternoon at a spa with friends. When I brought it up, she laughed it off. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "Being a mom is so stressful. I needed that break." Amy was even less subtle. When I hesitated about babysitting one weekend because I was preparing for a massive merger at work, she rolled her eyes and told me, "It's not like you have actual plans." That comment stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. Still, I kept saying yes. Until the day my phone started buzzing nonstop while I was buried in spreadsheets, drowning in deadlines, and trying to hold together a project that could define the next phase of my career. That call from Amy's sweet voice, vague excitement, and just enough urgency to make me pick up, was the beginning of something I didn't yet understand. At the time, it felt like just another family favor. Looking back now, I can see it for what it really was, the moment everything I'd ignored, excused, and minimized finally began to collapse under its own weight. If I had known what that phone call from Amy was really leading to, I might have let it go to voicemail. But habits like mine don't break easily. I'd been conditioned for years to respond, to accommodate, to solve. So there I was, sitting at my desk with 6 different reports spread across my screen, my inbox exploding with red exclamation marks, and my brain already running on fumes from another 12-hour day. The merger we were preparing for wasn't just big, it was career-defining. If it went well, it would cement my position in the company. If it didn't, I'd be the one answering for it. I was halfway through fixing a formula that had been throwing off an entire financial projection when my phone started buzzing across my desk. Amy's name lit up the screen. I ignored it the first time, then the second. By the third call, my phone was vibrating so insistently it was nudging itself toward the edge of my desk. I sighed, pinched the bridge of my nose, and answered while still typing with one hand. "Hey, Jane, you got a minute?" she asked, her voice coated in that overly cheerful tone she only uses when she wants something. "Kind of," I said, eyes flicking between cells on my spreadsheet. "What's going on?" "So you know Mom's turning 60 soon," Amy said, stretching the sentence out like she was about to deliver great news. I paused. I actually hadn't known. No one ever looped me in on these things unless there was a task attached. "Yeah," I murmured, mostly because my attention was still on the screen. The numbers finally snapped into place, and I felt a flicker of relief. "We're planning something really special," she continued, excitement practically vibrating through the phone. "Like really special, but we need everyone to chip in." That was when I stopped typing. "Okay," I said carefully. "How much?" When she told me the number, I actually choked on my coffee. I spluttered so hard it sprayed across my keyboard, and for a brief, panicked moment, I thought I'd just drowned my laptop. We were talking about more money than I'd spent on my last vacation, and that trip had been the only real break I'd taken in years. "That's a lot," I said once I could breathe again. "Oh, come on," Amy replied instantly. "It's for Mom, and you're the only one of us with a real career. The rest of us have families to support." There it was, that familiar little knife twist of guilt. Because I'm single, because I don't have kids, because apparently my expenses don't count. Never mind my city rent that costs more than their suburban mortgages, or the fact that I work insane hours to afford the life I've built. I didn't argue. I didn't even hesitate as much as I should have. "Fine," I said, already pulling up my banking app. "I'll transfer it now." "You're the best," Amy chirped. "Seriously. Oh, and clear your schedule for that week. Don't plan anything else." "Wait, what week?" I asked, but the line went dead. Classic Amy. Over the next few weeks, the calls didn't stop. They just changed shape. Amy would ring to check in, never giving actual details. "Just making sure you got those days off," she'd say. Or, "You're not planning anything else for when, that happens, right?" Every time I asked for dates, she dodged the question. Sarah joined in too, slipping babysitting requests into conversations like afterthoughts. "Oh, and can you watch my kid tomorrow?" she'd add casually, as if my schedule were a blank page waiting for her to fill. It started to get noticeable at work. My phone rang so often during meetings that Tom from my team joked, "Your phone rings more than customer service." Once during a strategy meeting, Amy called 3 times in a row. I muted the phone cheeks burning and tried to focus while my chest tightened with a sense of something being very wrong. I finally tried going around Amy and asking my mom directly. "What exactly is this thing you're planning?" I asked one evening while she was folding laundry. She froze, just for a second, but I saw it. Her hands fumbled with a dish towel, eyes darting away from mine. "Oh, well, you'll find out soon enough," she said with a nervous laugh. "Just trust me, it's a good thing." Then, as if on cue, she pivoted. "Did Sarah tell you about that nice young man from her church?" Even my cousin Kate started acting strange. "You're coming to the thing, right?" she asked casually when we ran into each other. "What thing?" I shot back. "When is it? Where is it?" She laughed like I was joking. "Oh, just say yes. You'll love it." "No, Kate. I really don't know," I said, crossing my arms. Her smile slipped for half a second before she recovered. "Well, you will soon enough," she said, and hurried away. By then I knew something was off. Nobody is that evasive about a birthday celebration. But I was so overwhelmed at work, so buried under deadlines and family emergencies, that I didn't give myself the space to fully question it. When my nephew got sent home from school for turning his classroom into an art gallery, meaning he drew on everything, guess who left work early to pick him up because Amy was busy with her latest MLM venture. Looking back now, it's painfully obvious. I was being set up. I just didn't know how badly yet. The truth didn't fully reveal itself until our monthly family dinner, the one my mom guilted me into attending, despite the massive presentation looming the next morning. I walked into that house, already exhausted, already stretched thin, completely unprepared. For the moment, everything would finally snap into focus. That family dinner started the same way they always do, loud, chaotic, and deceptively normal. I arrived straight from work, blazer still on laptop bag. Digging into my shoulder, my mind split between polite smiles and the unfinished slides waiting for me back home. The house smelled like overcooked chicken and whatever candle my mom was currently obsessed with. Kids were already running laps between the living room and the kitchen, shrieking with the kind of energy that only comes from being sugar-fueled and unchecked. Dad sat at the table pretending to watch a sports highlight on his phone while actually playing some game with tiny exploding candies. Sarah was perched near the counter, hair perfectly styled, voice already projecting that soft, righteous warmth she saves for moments when she wants to appear gracious. Amy hovered like a stage manager, darting around and exchanging looks with people I couldn't quite read yet. I took my usual seat and immediately pulled my phone out under the table, pretending to check messages while scanning my email for anything urgent. My stomach was tight, not from hunger, but from that familiar pressure of being pulled in too many directions at once. I hadn't even taken a bite yet when my cousin Kate suddenly leaned forward, eyes wide with exaggerated excitement. "Oh my God, Jane," she said loudly. "Did you bring your planner? We need to check some dates." Before I could answer, Amy let out the most theatrical fake cough I'd ever heard. It was so obvious it almost made me laugh. Almost. The room went quiet in an instant, the kind of silence that feels intentional. Even the kids seemed to sense something, and slowed down, one of them frozen mid-sneak near the cookie jar. Amy stood up. It was subtle, but unmistakable. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her shirt, and smiled like someone about to accept an award. "Actually," she said, clasping her hands together, "we have an announcement about Mom's birthday." Everyone turned toward her, faces lighting up with anticipation. Everyone except me. My chest tightened, that uneasy feeling I'd been trying to ignore for weeks suddenly roaring to life. "We've booked a week at Pine Valley Lodge," Amy continued proudly. "All expenses paid. A full resort experience. Skiing spa days, gourmet dining, the works." The room exploded into applause. Mom's hands flew to her mouth as she gasped, eyes filling with tears. Dad finally looked up from his phone, smiling wide. Sarah reached over to hug Mom, murmuring something about how she deserved it. People started talking over one another, congratulating, reminiscing, already planning outfits and activities. I sat there barely hearing any of it, doing mental math instead. Quick, sharp calculations. The money I'd transferred, the vague calls, the secrecy, the schedule clearing. A cold realization settled into my bones. Then Sarah turned to me with that familiar sugary smile. "Jane, you're so amazing with the kids," she said lightly. "They're going to love having you watch them that week." I froze fork halfway to my mouth. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "What?" "Oh, don't worry." Amy jumped in, waving a hand, like this was the most obvious thing in the world. "We've got it all planned out. You'll stay in the little cabin behind the main lodge. It has a mini fridge and everything." "The kids are so excited," Sarah added. "A whole week with Aunt Jane." It took me a second to find my voice. "You want me to watch 5 kids for a full week?" "Yes," Amy said brightly, like she was confirming the weather. "I can't take a week off," I said, my pulse pounding in my ears. "We have a huge merger happening at work." Amy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that work thing. Just reschedule it." I stared at her. "You want me to reschedule a corporate merger?" "Well," Sarah said, tilting her head with practiced concern, "it's not like you have actual responsibilities like we do. Your job is just a job." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not yet, but enough that I felt it. "My job pays my bills," I said carefully. "And apparently your vacation, too." Mom tried to intervene, voice soft but firm. "Jane, we're family, and you're so good with the kids. They won't behave for anyone else like they do for you," Amy added. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. The memory of my laptop smeared with finger paint and my phone nearly drowned in a toilet flashed through my mind. Angels, apparently. "If you want me to watch 5 kids under 7 for a week," I said, setting my fork down, "you need to pay me." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Sarah clutched her necklace like I'd just insulted her faith. Amy burst out laughing. Mom shook her head slowly, disappointment etched deep into her expression. "We're not paying you to spend time with your own family," Amy said. "That's ridiculous." So it is a job, I replied, just one you don't want to pay for. The room grew tense, the air thick with judgment and disbelief. And in that moment, sitting at that table, surrounded by people who saw my time as expendable and my life as incomplete, I realized something painful and undeniable. I hadn't just been excluded from the vacation. I'd been assigned my place in it. For a moment after that, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that feels loaded heavy with unsaid accusations and wounded pride. I could feel all of their eyes on me waiting for me to laugh it off, to backpedal, to say I didn't really mean it, that I would, as always, fall back into line. My hands were trembling slightly, so I folded them together in my lap and focused on breathing evenly. "You're being ridiculous," Amy finally said, still smiling like this was all some big misunderstanding. "It's not a job. It's family." "Then why didn't you ask me first?" I said quietly. That wiped the smile off her face. Sarah recovered quickly, though. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice dripping with that false patience she reserves for people she believes are beneath her. "Jane, you love the kids. You always say how much they mean to you." "I love my nieces and nephews," I corrected. "That doesn't mean I want to be their unpaid nanny while everyone else goes skiing." Mom let out a long sigh, the kind that signals she's already decided I'm in the wrong. "I just don't understand why you're being so difficult," she said. "After everything we've done for you." I laughed then. I couldn't help it. It slipped out sharp and bitter, surprising even me. Like what I asked. Using my money. Volunteering my time without asking. Making me feel guilty for not living my life the way you want me to. Amy scoffed. "Don't make this into something it's not." "Then let's talk numbers," I said, pulling my laptop toward me. My voice was steady now, almost calm, the way it gets right before I make a hard decision at work. 5 kids, 24 hours a day, 7 days. The going rate for a nanny in this area is $25 an hour for one child, plus $5 for each additional one. That's $45 an hour. I tapped at the calculator, the sound loud in the quiet room. That comes out to just over $7,500 for the week, on top of the money I already paid for the trip. You would have thought I'd suggested something obscene. Sarah gasped audibly. Amy laughed again, louder this time. Mom shook her head like I'd personally disappointed her. "We are not paying you to spend time with your own family," Amy said flatly. "So you admit it's work," I replied. "Just not work you respect." "It's not real work," Sarah snapped. "You sit in an office all day. How hard can it be?" That did it. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped loudly against the floor. I manage a team of 15 people. I said, my voice shaking, despite my effort to stay calm. "I handle multi-million-dollar accounts. I've worked 60-hour weeks for 10 years to get where I am." Amy's eyes lit up triumphant. "See, you're used to working hard. Watching the kids will be easy for you." I looked around the table then, at Mom, who wouldn't meet my eyes, at Dad still hiding behind his phone, at Sarah smirking like she'd won, at Amy already distracted trying to stop her child from drawing on the tablecloth. Something in me finally gave way, not in anger, but in clarity. "You're right," I said slowly. "I am used to working hard. I'm used to being responsible. I'm used to putting everyone else first." I picked up my bag. "But I'm done being your free babysitter." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Now you're just being dramatic." She paused, then added casually, "This is why you're still single, you know. Men don't like women who are so career-obsessed." The words hit harder than I expected, not because I believed them, but because of the way she said them, smug, certain, like she'd finally diagnosed what was wrong with me. I straightened my hands, steady now. "I'm single because I choose to be," I said. "I'm successful because I work hard. And I'm leaving because I finally understand something." Mama opened her mouth. "Jane, you don't care about me," I continued, my voice breaking just slightly. "You care about what I can do for you." Then I walked out. I barely remember the drive home. One moment I was pulling out of their driveway, the next I was sitting in the parking garage of my apartment building, engine off, staring straight ahead as if I'd forgotten how to move. My phone lit up almost immediately. Text from Amy. Photos of my nephew with a carefully sad expression. Paragraphs from Sarah about my unchristian behavior. A single sad face emoji from Mom, the one she knows gets to me. I turned the phone face down and sat there replaying every time I'd dropped everything for them. Every meeting I'd left early. Every weekend I'd given up. Every time I'd told myself it was fine. When my phone buzzed again, I almost ignored it. Almost. But this time it was Aunt Lisa. "You okay, kiddo?" her message read. "That was rough, but I'm proud of you." That was when I finally broke. I cried there in my car until my chest hurt and my face was blotchy mourning. Not just what had happened, but everything I'd let happen for years. By the time I dragged myself upstairs and unlocked my apartment, I was exhausted, but something else was there, too faint but undeniable. For the first time, I wasn't just saying no. I was starting to choose myself. My apartment was quiet in a way that felt intentional, almost protective. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city lights blinking in steady rhythms, a reminder of everything I had built on my own. I dropped my bag by the door and stood there for a long moment just breathing. This place was small by my family's standards. No backyard, no spare rooms, but it was mine. I paid for it with long nights and skipped vacations with ambition and exhaustion braided together. Sarah liked to call it cute, the way people talk about things they don't quite take seriously. But standing there that night, it felt like the only place I could finally hear myself think. My phone buzzed again on the kitchen counter. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, replaying the last few hours in my head. The looks, the words, the absolute certainty with which they had assumed my time belonged to them. That was when the thought hit me soft at first, almost ridiculous. I had savings. Not just any savings either. A carefully guarded chunk of money I'd always referred to as my emergency fund. But if I was honest, it had never really been for me. It was the buffer I kept in case someone else needed something, the silent promise that I would always be able to help. I opened my laptop. At first, I told myself I was just browsing, just looking. Flights, hotels, places I'd once bookmarked and then forgotten. Spain popped up almost immediately. Barcelona, Madrid, Seville. Art museums I'd studied in college, streets I'd imagined walking someday when life slowed down. My hands hovered over the trackpad, heart pounding in a way that felt suspiciously like excitement. I glanced at my phone again. Another message from Sarah lit up the screen. The kids are crying because their favorite aunt is being selfish. I hope you're happy. Something in me hardened. I clicked book now. The confirmation page loaded slowly, each second stretching out as if the universe wanted to make sure I was serious. Flights, hotel, tours, food experiences, a real vacation one where I wouldn't be answering emails by the pool or leaving early because someone needed me. When the final confirmation email landed in my inbox, a laugh bubbled up out of nowhere. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from anxiety. It was relief. Then I did something even more shocking. I opened my work email and wrote to my boss asking for 2 weeks off instead of 1. I hesitated before hitting send, old instincts whispering that I was asking for too much. Her reply came minutes later. Finally, she wrote, "You need this. Approved. Don't check your email while you're gone." My phone buzzed nonstop after that. Calls, texts, voicemails stacking up faster than I could ignore them. I turned the phone off completely and set it face down like a physical act of defiance. Standing by the window, watching the city glow beneath me, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't tell anyone about Spain. I didn't need to. For once, this was mine. The silence lasted a few days. Long enough that I knew they thought I was bluffing. Then, as the departure date crept closer, the messages started again, more urgent, more aggressive. I read them all and responded to none. The night before their trip, I sat on my couch, watching the notifications roll in, guilt trips turning into accusations. Finally, I opened my email, the formal one I used for work, and wrote a single message to the entire family. I was aware of the plan to use me as childcare. That would not be happening. I was not included, and I was not available. This was not up for discussion. Bon voyage. The fallout was immediate. Amy sent text after text demanding explanations. Sarah went straight for emotional warfare. Mom sent her sad face emoji again. Dad left an awkward voicemail asking if we could talk this out. I put my phone on airplane mode and started packing my suitcase, every folded shirt a small act of rebellion. While they spiraled, confirmation emails kept coming in. Restaurant reservations. Museum passes, a beginner. Spanish class I'd signed up for on impulse. With each one, the knot in my chest loosened. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission or forgiveness. I was leaving. And I had a feeling they weren't going to take that well at all. I was halfway through packing when I heard them in the hallway. At first, it was just a murmur. Voices bleeding through the walls of the apartment corridor, indistinct but unmistakably familiar. Then Sarah's voice cut through the noise, sharp and carrying. The way it always does when she's upset. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. The knocking came seconds later, loud and insistent, followed by my name called like a summons rather than a request. "Jane, open the door." I stayed still, suitcase open on the bed behind me, clothes neatly folded like evidence of intent. The knocking continued louder this time, layered with muttered commentary I could only half hear. I imagined my neighbors pausing in their apartments, curious. Embarrassed heat crept up my neck, followed quickly by anger. Of course they'd come. Of course they'd decide that my home, my one safe place, was now the stage for whatever this was supposed to be. When I finally opened the door, they pushed in before I could say a word. Mom was already crying, hands fluttering uselessly at her chest. Dad hovered just behind her eyes, darting around my apartment like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Amy walked in with purpose, jaw tight, while Sarah followed last, her expression composed, in that unsettling way she gets when she's convinced she's right. "We've been talking." Sarah began, clasping her hands together like she was about to lead a prayer. "And we're really worried about you." I laughed, a short sound that surprised even me. "My mental state is fine," I said. "Better than it's been in years." "You abandoned your family," Amy snapped. "You're refusing to help with the children. That's not normal." "I'm refusing to be your unpaid nanny," I said calmly. "The kids have parents. Multiple parents. All of whom are choosing to go on vacation instead of watching their own children." Mom sobbed harder. "We just want to help you," she said. "You're acting so unlike yourself." "What part?" I asked. "The part where I set boundaries? Or the part where I booked a vacation like an adult?" Sarah's lips pressed together. "This sudden behavior," she said slowly, "the aggressive email, the impulsive trip, it's concerning. If it's affecting the children, we may need to consider other options." My blood ran cold. "What options?" She met my eyes without flinching. "If you keep acting like this," she said, "we might have to call CPS." The room went silent. For a split second, I couldn't move. The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. "Are you seriously threatening to call CPS?" I said slowly. "Because I won't babysit for free while you go on vacation." "We're worried about your relationship with the kids," Amy added quickly. "Your sudden refusal to see them." "I haven't refused to see them," I cut in. "I've refused to be used." Mom was crying openly now, murmuring about how she didn't recognize me anymore. Sarah reached for her phone like she was actually considering it, like this was some righteous escalation instead of a grotesque overreach. "That's enough." Dad's voice cut through the room louder than I'd ever heard it. He stepped forward, shoulders squared in a way that startled all of us. "Put the phone away, Sarah. You're being ridiculous." She scoffed. "I'm just trying to protect the children." From what he shot back. Their aunt setting boundaries. He turned to me, then eyes filled with something that looked suspiciously like shame. "This has gone too far." I felt something settle inside me then. Not fear, not guilt, but resolve. "I want you all to leave," I said. "Now. And if anyone ever threatens me with CPS again, I will go straight to a lawyer." "You'd sue your own family," Sarah gasped. "Try me," I replied. They left eventually. Mom throwing one last wounded look over her shoulder, Sarah muttering something about instability. The door closed behind them with a final, solid click that echoed through the apartment. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, then reached for my phone and called Aunt Lisa. By the time I finished telling her everything, she was furious on my behalf. She promised to handle Mom, and I believed her. I also texted a friend from work who happens to be a lawyer, just in case. When I finally sat down on my bed, suitcase still open, the last traces of guilt evaporated. If I'd needed confirmation that leaving was the right choice, they'd just handed it to me. I was flying to Spain in less than 24 hours, and nothing was going to stop me now. Spain felt unreal in the best possible way. The moment the plane touched down, it was like my nervous system finally understood that I was safe. I turned my phone off completely. Before we even reached the gate, a small but powerful act that sent a rush of calm through my chest. No notifications, no guilt, no emergencies that weren't actually emergencies. Just me, my suitcase, and a country I'd dreamed about for years without ever letting myself go. The days unfolded slowly, deliberately, like they were meant to be savored instead of rushed through. I walked for hours, without checking the time, getting lost on purpose through narrow streets that smelled like coffee and fresh bread. I spent entire afternoons in museums, standing in front of paintings I'd only ever seen in textbooks, letting myself feel small and inspired instead of pressured. I ate alone without feeling awkward, ordered too much food just because I could, and took naps in the middle of the day with the windows open, sunlight spilling across the bed. For the first time in years, my body wasn't braced for interruption. I sent pictures only to Aunt Lisa. She replied to everyone with some version of, "Look at you," or "I'm so proud of you," and each message felt like quiet validation, stitched into my days. I even met people, other travelers, locals who laughed kindly at my terrible accent, a British man in town for work who asked about my job and actually listened when I talked about it. Nothing serious came of it, but it was enough to remind me that the version of me my family dismissed wasn't invisible or unlovable. She was just surrounded by the wrong audience. While I was gone, the fallout back home intensified. I found out later in fragments the way you do when you're no longer in the middle of the storm. They'd gone on the trip anyway. They'd hired a babysitter. They'd had to pay her actual money. Shocking, apparently. Even more shocking was the fact that she quit after 2 days, citing the kids being too difficult to manage. I laughed when I heard that, an honest, unguarded laugh. Funny how they were angels when I was the one exhausted and unpaid. Amy had to cancel her so-called business retreat when childcare fell through for part of the week, and she'd been doing damage control online ever since. Sarah, meanwhile, leaned hard into the victim narrative, telling anyone who would listen that I'd abandoned the family and traumatized the children. Passive-aggressive posts bloomed across her social media like clockwork quotes about loyalty, family values, and selfish people who choose careers over love. I didn't see most of it until much later. I didn't need to. I was too busy living. When I came home, the difference was immediate. I walked into my apartment with a sense of ownership I'd never felt before, like I wasn't just existing in my life anymore, I was choosing it. Work felt different too. The merger went better than anyone expected. I was sharper, more focused, less resentful. A few weeks later, my boss called me into her office and told me I was getting a bonus and a promotion. She mentioned how much more grounded I seemed lately, how leadership looked good on me, when I wasn't constantly being pulled in 100 directions. Sarah tried one last time to escalate things, spreading rumors through her church that I was mentally unstable. That was the moment I stopped hoping for peace and started choosing protection. I had my lawyer friend send a formal cease and desist letter. It worked. Sarah went quiet overnight. The family was still angry, still disappointed, still convinced I'd changed for the worse. But sitting on my couch one evening, sipping coffee I actually had time to enjoy, I realized something important. They were right about one thing. I had changed, and my life was better for it. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was intentional. For the first time in my adult life, my calendar wasn't packed with obligations I hadn't agreed to. No last-minute babysitting requests. No guilt-laced check-ins disguised as concern. No emergencies that somehow always landed in my lap. My evenings became mine again. I started filling them slowly, carefully, the way you do when you're learning how to live for yourself instead of reacting to everyone else. I signed up for a painting class on a whim, something I'd always wanted to do, but never prioritized. I was terrible at it at first, but I loved the way the hours slipped by without pressure. I redecorated my apartment, replacing furniture I'd chosen for practicality with pieces that actually made me happy. A few weeks later, I adopted a cat from a local shelter. She immediately took over the place like she'd always lived there, curling up on my laptop and demanding attention whenever I tried to work too late. I named her Pa after the Spanish food I'd fallen in love with on my trip. She felt like a symbol of something new, companionship that didn't come with conditions. Aunt Lisa became a regular part of my routine. We started meeting for coffee every week, and in between laughs and casual gossip, she shared things I'd never known about my family fractures beneath the polished surface struggles they'd hidden behind judgment. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it explained it. And strangely, that understanding gave me peace. I no longer felt responsible for fixing what I hadn't broken. Work continued to thrive. The promotion brought new challenges, but instead of overwhelming me, they energized me. I had boundaries now. I left on time more often. I stopped apologizing for needing space. The respect I'd earned professionally felt different this time because I finally believed I deserved it. Then one evening, weeks after everything had gone quiet, I received an email from Dad. It was long, longer than anything he'd ever sent me before. He apologized, not in vague terms, not with excuses, but directly, for not standing up for me, for staying silent when he should have spoken. He told me he was proud of the way I'd handled myself, even if it had taken him too long to say it. I read it twice, then sat there for a while with my hands folded in my lap, letting the words settle. I didn't rush to respond. I wasn't ready to reopen doors just because someone knocked politely. But his message mattered. It reminded me that growth doesn't always come with instant reconciliation, and that was okay. I thought about the version of myself who believed being needed was the same as being loved, about how small I'd made my own life to fit everyone else's expectations, about how terrified I'd been to say no. And then I looked around my apartment at my paintings, my cat, my packed calendar full of things I'd chosen, and felt something close to joy. I don't know what the future holds with my family. Maybe there will be distance. Maybe someday there will be something new built on respect instead of obligation. But I do know this: I no longer measure my worth by how much I give away. My life is full now, not with emergencies or demands, but with intention, with peace, with people who see me as a person, not a resource. And for the first time in a long time, that's more than enough.